Hello everyone, how is everyone doing today? If you are asked what is the score of your happiness today, starting from 0 to 10, 0 is the lowest and 10 is the highest. So what would be your score today? If your score is lower than 5, and that is the red flag telling you that something is not right today. Hope everyone can maintain the high score of happiness as you go through life on a daily basis. Happiness, neutral, and unhappiness feelings come from the same source, which is human mind. And the reason the mind cannot be happy is because our mind gets bombarding with all kinds of stimuli during the day, the moment we wake up until the time we go to bed. And most likely those stimuli are negative. In other words, our mind being toxic because of those negativity. When the mind is being toxic, we lose clarity of the mind. We cannot remain calm, we feel agitated, and we are unhappy. The question is, how do we deal with this? Is there anything we can do when our mind is being toxic or being poisoned by those negativity that coming to us on a daily basis? So today we will explore the teaching of the Buddha of how to deal with toxic thought as it arrives in our mind. So let's hang out with our great teacher, the Buddha. First, let's define what is meant by toxic thought. What's come to your mind when you hear the word toxic or the word poison? Through the lens of the Buddha, when our thought get influenced by one of these or the combination of this defilement or the toxic, then our mind cannot remain calm, remain happy, or remain clear. You may be thinking of the boiling water. The regular water is clear, pure, and clean, so we can see it through what's inside the glass. If we put this water on the stove and we start boiling it, eventually we will see the bubble. The water will turn from a regular water to be a turbulent water. It's from the cold water to be heat, from cold water to be a hot water. When the water is being boiled, the water no longer maintains its original state, which is calm, still, and cold. Similar to this, when human mind being toxic, from lust, from greed, from hate, from delusion, the mind will turn from a clear mind to be a crowded mind, a still mind to be a turbulent mind, a peaceful mind to be an agitated mind, and then the mind is no longer being happy. In one particular sutra, the Buddha gives the 5 sets of instruction to the monk who practice meditation, try to still the mind, try to feel relaxed, and during his meditation, he noticed that he gets disturbed by the toxic thought, either by lust, by hate, by delusion, and he didn't know how to deal with that. And the more he tried to fight with those thoughts, to bring the mind to come back, to stay still, and to regain clarity of his mind, it seemed like more and more of those toxic thoughts keep on coming back to him, and he didn't know what to do, and that is why he seek for the advice from the Buddha. So let's take a look into these 5 instructions of the Buddha to see if it helps us to lessen or to deal with the toxic thoughts as it arrives in our mind properly. First, to identify those thoughts, what kind of toxic thought that arises in your mind, whether the thought that come from lust, from anger, from ill will, from delusion. And once you identify that thought, then you think of something opposite or think of something else. For example, all of a sudden you are unhappy because you think of a person that you have a conflict with. You get mad with him, you have a resentment toward that person. Every time you think of that person, you are unhappy. After you take a few deep breaths, you may regain some level of consciousness, and then you identify that, okay, the reason I feel agitated because I feel resentment toward that person. Instead of you keep thinking toward that person with the hatred mind, you think of something opposite. You can think of loving kindness, you can think of compassion toward that person if you can. But if you cannot, thinking of people you love or someone that you have a fond feeling with, maybe thinking of your parents, thinking of your children, thinking of your loved one, or someone who do something good to you. So you basically thinking of something opposite, or you turn your thinking into something else. Every time this toxic thought arrives with anger toward that person, right away you direct your thought towards something else that make you feel good. The more you will feel relaxed and feel ease of those negative thoughts that arrive. If you're thinking of lust or craving for some sensual desire, then maybe you can thinking of something opposite, like the nature of life, that people get old, people get ill, and eventually people die. By reflect on the nature of life like this, maybe it helps you to distance yourself from the lustful mind. So this is just some of the examples that you can apply when lust or when anger come to your mind. As the monk continue practice, according to the first instruction of the Buddha, he identified the toxic thought that arrived in his mind and he tried to think of something opposite. But he said, I did that. Somehow those toxic thoughts keep on coming back to me, and what should I do, the Buddha? And now the Buddha gave him the second set of instruction, which is examine the drawbacks of those negative thoughts. Let's use the same example. If you feel angry towards someone, you have resentment towards someone and you cannot let that go, and you don't know what to do, you try to identify it and you try to think of something opposite. It works temporarily and then it keeps coming back again. And now this instruction telling us to examine the drawback of those toxic thoughts. What would be the drawback or holding resentment towards someone? One of the beautiful simile that maybe we can relate it to this. You're thinking of a man who holding the hot charcoal in his hand. It's very hot and it keeps burning his hand. So he tried to throw this hot charcoal to the person that he hates or someone that he gets angry with. During the process of trying to hurt someone, he has been hurting himself by keep on holding that hot charcoal in his hand. Similar to this, when we hold on the resentment or get angry at someone and we cannot let go that anger, we hold on this hot temper in our mind day and night. Every single breath we take, we cannot be happy, we cannot be relaxed. And the person that we get mad with or we get angry with, he may be enjoying his life, doing something that he loves to do. He may not know anything about this. So he sleeps at peace. He feels nothing about us getting angry with him. But for us as a person who hold on that anger, we cannot sleep at peace. You create unnecessary stress into your life by keep on holding resentment towards others. So if you start making a list of the drawback of anger, then you start seeing that, oh, this is unbeneficial. Maybe I should let go of this thought. What about other kind of toxic, such as lust or delusion or ill will? You can do the same thing. You can make a list from number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. The list can go on and on, doesn't matter. As long as you keep examining and write down those drawbacks of those toxic thoughts that arise in your mind, then it reminds you that, well, maybe you shouldn't spend time on worry too much about this toxic thought in your mind. So instead of doing this, maybe I should let go and do something else. And now we come to the third set of instruction. Even though you identified it, you think of something opposite, but those toxic thoughts still keep on coming back, then you apply the second technique, which is to examine the drawback of those toxic thoughts. However, they still keep coming back to you, which is happened to the mind of the ascetic back then when they practiced meditation with the Buddha as well. The third set of instruction, the Buddha suggests the monk that if they still keep on coming back to you, now it's time for you to completely ignore those thoughts, to forget about them completely. Do whatever it takes to pay no attention to those toxic thoughts that arise into your mind. You think of when you don't like to see something or someone, you just simply close your eye, or you turn your face away to different direction. Then you don't have to see the person or the thing that you don't want to see. Similar to this. And this instruction sounds to be very simple, right? But in the reality, how can we actually do this? How can we all of a sudden forget or ignore the toxic thought that arise in our mind? According to the psychology, it is said when the body moves, our emotion will be changing as well. So instead of us sitting there and allow the toxic thought keep on disturbing our mind, we cannot be happy, we feel agitated. Please don't just sit there. Get up and do something else. For example, if a man feeling sad because his girlfriend left him, his heart is broken, and now the toxic thought about lust, about craving arrive in his mind. According to this instruction and the knowledge from psychology, if this man keep on sitting there and allow the sadness, allow those toxic to overwhelm his mind longer and longer, if he cannot regain his consciousness and the clarity of his mind in time, he may be doing something that unskillful, hurting himself or hurting others. But instead of allow himself to sit there for a very long time, overwhelming with the sadness and suffering from heartbroken, if he can get up and take a walk, maybe put on his sneaker and go to the gym, get his body moving, go eating, go talking to another friend, basically if he can change the activity, get himself moving, then he start distancing himself from those negative thoughts that arise from his mind. He distracts his mind towards something else, and that gives him the space and time to regain his consciousness and wisdom. And once he is mindful what's going on in his mind, then his life has more options. He can choose to do something more skillful to deal with this toxic thought that arrive in his mind because of the heartbroken. Next time you're not feeling well about something, don't just sit there, get up and do something. Maybe you can take the dog out for the walk, call up your friend to hang out with a cup of coffee or having dinner. And that should help you to forget the toxic thought that arrives in your mind. This instruction need time to master because usually it will be quite challenging for all of us to all of a sudden forget the thing that we don't want to think about. What if those toxic thoughts still keep on coming back to us? The fourth set of instruction that the Buddha gave is to focusing on stopping those toxic thought formation. And this is getting more interesting. In the Buddha time, there was a monk who tried to meditate and calm his mind. All of a sudden, he think of sense pleasure, he think of his ex-wife, and he didn't know how to calm the mind down. The Buddha suggests him to reflect on the nature of this physical body. Where exactly in this physical body that you think is beauty? Is it her eye, her ear, her nail, her teeth, her skin? And if you zoom in deeper into the body itself, you will notice that there is a bone, there is a flesh, there is a blood, there is a saliva, there is a heart, lung, intestine, the physique. Body is actually dirty and ugly. There's nothing in this body is considered beauty. Both of us, whether man or woman, if we don't take a shower for a few days, what happened to the body? As he reflects on the instruction of the Buddha, then his mind gets detached from the sense pleasure, and eventually he can regain his clarity and the stillness of his mind. What about anger? If someone getting angry at someone and then cannot let go that anger or resentment toward another person, maybe we can reflect on something called the 5 daily reflection that the Buddha advised for both monks and the lay people to reflect on this every single day. The more the merrier. It helps us to lessen the worry and suffering in life, and also I believe it also helps us to let go the resentment that we have in our mind. First, he suggests us to reflect on that human being, no matter how much you love the person or no matter how much you hate that person, we all eventually are going to die. And the fourth one is about separation, right? We are facing separation from the thing we love and from the thing that we hate. That happened to all of us. And the last one, we are subject to something called the law of karma. If we do good, we receive good. If we do bad, we receive bad. Whatever that person done to you that make you get angry, it's become their karma. And now you have choice whether you to return the resentment to the bad action back to that person or to develop loving kindness and compassion and forgiveness. You have choice, and now it's become your karma. I suggest you, of course, to make sure that you do only good karma, not the bad karma. I hope you see the picture of how to stay focused in stopping the toxic thought formation that arrive in your mind. So try to break down the thought when it's arrived, and then you start seeing way of how to calm your mind down and regain peace and calmness of your own mind. Well, what if I do all of this and it still doesn't work? I identified it, I think of something opposite, I examine the drawback, I try to forget it, and I try to looking into the way to stop those thought formation. But those negative thoughts still keep on coming back to me. And now the Buddha gives the last set of instruction to the monk of how to deal with toxic thought as it arrives. After he have done all of this, but it still didn't work. Now the Buddha tell him to use the direct physical force to fight with the thought. He suggests the monk or the ascetic who practice meditation, and he suggests those monks who practice meditation but get disturbed by those toxic thoughts to clench his teeth and press his tongue to the roof of the mouth. Torture the mind with the mind. This may sound too extreme, right? You don't have to do this, okay? But this is what happened. You have to understand that this instruction the Buddha gave to the monk who seek for advice when he meditates and he cannot fight with sense pleasure, and that is why it's come to this last set of instruction. So the Buddha suggests him to clench his teeth and press his tongue on top to the roof of the mouth and observe to see if those thoughts still arise. By doing this, his mind tends to incline toward the physical discomfort, right? Because he clenched his teeth and he pressed his tongue. Maybe the toxic thoughts are still there, but he pays no attention to those toxic thoughts. Every time the thoughts show up, he just do the same thing by clenching his teeth and pressing his tongue to the roof of the mouth. So as he keep on doing that, later on those toxic thoughts fade away, and then he can regain peace and calmness of his own mind. And that's what worked for many people in the past. But in our case, we may not have to do this. This may sound extreme to you to put into practice. Then you don't have to do this. To use this technique or not, you need to put into your consideration. As we come this far, we have learned the 5 tips that help us to deal with the toxic thought. As I reflect to this teaching, I come to one conclusion for myself, and I believe it's useful information for all of us to put into practice. The mind can perceive of one thing at a time. In other words, the mind can think of one thing at a time. If you are happy, you cannot be sad. If you are sad, you cannot be happy. In these 5 set of instructions, if you pay attention, the Buddha gave the technique to the monk to shift his attention towards something else. Then the toxic thought slowly fades away, and he can regain his consciousness and calmness of the mind later. If we can understand this nature of the mind, that the mind can think of one thing at a time, I think it's very useful and beneficial. So let's get back to the same example with the man with broken heart. If he allow himself to sit there longer, overwhelming himself with sadness from heartbroken, he may be doing something that he may not be doing when he is conscious, like harming himself or harming others, or even committed suicide. And now we know that the mind can think of one thing at a time. When his mind being sad, his mind cannot being happy. So what he can do is just get up and do something else. Then later on, you can come up with a better solution of how to deal with this heartbroken problem, right? If only one person that doesn't love you, it doesn't mean that you lost everything. You have parents, you have friends, you have many people who love you. When you start seeing something correctly in the right direction, then your thinking and your action will be followed in a wholesome way. I hope all of this information is useful for all of us to apply in dealing with toxic thought when it arises in your mind, whatever it is. Namo Buddhaya.